Welcome, everybody. This is Coach Bronson, and today I am joined by Coach Stephen Thomas, also known as the UK Carnivore. Did you know there's multiple UK Carnivores?
I did. There's the Carnivore UK. There's the UK Carnivore guy, but I'm the original, the UK Carnivore.
The one and only. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit. So I know you're a coach. You've got some experience doing carnivore, but you also have a fitness background. You do a bunch of things. Who are you, and what do you do, Stephen?
Hi. Well, I'm Coach Stephen, as you said, and this May in 2024, I'm going to be 60. I've been in and around fitness and sport since since 13, 14, to be honest.
Mhm.
I was a pretty good runner at school, had the 800-meter school record.
Wow.
And up until 50 years of age, I believed in high carb and all that stuff. Semi-professional soccer player. I did a bodybuilding tournament. I won a singles title in tennis. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely into sport. And then as I got older, I got into middle distance running and doing half marathons, mile sprints. Yes, really, a whole mile for a sprint. I was being trained by guys that has actually won marathons, so really into it. And the reason I'm giving people that background is because I started getting really sick and ill and fat and pre-diabetic and lower left quadrant pain and everything was going wrong, which really astounded me because I was doing everything right in
Mhm.
inverted commas. I was eating grains, I was having skim milk, I was having porridge with blueberries, or you call it oatmeal, freshly squeezed orange juice, wasn't touching red meat, no fat in my diet, didn't smoke, didn't drink, and I was active. Right, so I should be the guidelines poster boy.
Right.
And I certainly wasn't. I lost both my parents when I was very young. My mother had colon cancer, even though she followed pretty much like the vegan diet with cereals and bran and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
I do get a little bit triggered by vegans that tell me I'm going to get colon cancer. They have no clue. They are absolutely clueless, having watched both my parents and a girlfriend die, and they all did not touch red meat and they didn't have saturated fat and all that sort of stuff. But we won't
Wow.
get into personal there. So anyway, I get to my 40s and I've been doing rehab and I really wanted to get a bit more involved. And I was a personal trainer. I wanted to be an advanced personal trainer because I think one of the reasons I'm on your shows because I like to learn things and I like to be open and listen to new knowledge. And
Mhm.
became an advanced personal trainer. I think I did pretty well. I ended up training someone that was in the Olympics, and I still couldn't work out what was going on. And she was type 1 diabetic, actually. So I decided to get specialism in diabetes and obesity,
Okay.
and oh, sorry, am I taking too long to
No,
answer your
no, go for
question?
it. No, that's good.
And that was a real moment just once I started learning about obesity and diabetes because I was pre-diabetic myself,
Mm.
and I was also getting tubbier, and I shouldn't be according to the guidelines. And I can
Mhm.
remember because I didn't come from a medical background, the tutor saying we need to adjust insulin in relation to carbohydrate intake. So the more carbohydrates, the more insulin. And I just put my hand up and said, well, why not just have less carbohydrates so we have less insulin? That to me seemed really obvious. And that was my little alarm bell, but it didn't cut much ice at the time. So
Yep.
anyway, there's general practitioners and there's specialist practitioners. I got specialist practitioner status in obesity and diabetes. I then got fed up with the blood, the labs basically dictating to me and telling me stuff that I didn't think was right. So I qualified as a phlebotomist as well. So I could work at the National Health Service. I could offer private blood tests. I could work with doctors, which I did do. I eventually
Mhm.
did that. So I really got into the weeds with it all. And I realized that I was eating the wrong thing. So, being me, I went and got a coronary artery calcium scan. Remember, I didn't have saturated fat, I didn't have any of that stuff, and I had a score of 639. I told the radiologist it was going to be an awful score. Now, a lot of people are 20 or 30 are going to listen to this and think, what a load of old, rubbish. Uh, and why would I thought that? Because I looked great,
Mhm.
I did a bodybuilding tournament. You can't stand up on the stage unless you look okay. So it's not me being big headed. There's no way you do that unless, you look all right. So I looked okay, but I wasn't internally. And like I say, the lower left quadrant pain scared the bejeebus out of me because my mum had colon cancer, and there was I at 48 thinking, this is it. I'm going to follow my mum. I'm going to have colon cancer. and I was petrified. I was
Yeah.
terrified,
Yeah.
absolutely terrified. Now that's a big change, by the way. I'm gonna just fast forward and say all of my fears, I don't have at all. I don't have any belief that I'm gonna get cancer, not because 'cause I'm an idiot, it's because I've learnt about the body.
Mhm.
But at that point, I can remember sitting in that, outpatients waiting room to get the results
Yeah.
and hearing and seeing other people get terrible results, you know, which was awful, and I just thought, "I'm doomed." So anyway, when I got to 50, it all just gelled. I just thought, "Do you know what? I am definitely eating the wrong way. I've got these terrible pains. I've got gas bloating. I'm tubby. My skin's awful." I had a great big sort of spot like someone had got a strawberry and smashed against my
Mm.
forehead.
Mhm.
And I just went low carb. I had some little niggly things. And when we spoke on my channel, and you were talking about some sort of little low level things, I had athlete's foot the entire time I was eating high carb, and I tried everything. So I
Mhm.
went low carb, and my skin cleared up, and my body composition improved, and my low left quadrant pain went, and my pre-diabetes went, and my athlete's foot went. And it didn't clear up totally, but it within weeks I knew that I'd been duped. And
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
I know we have to be careful what we say on this platform, but the food guidelines are absolutely rubbish.
Yeah.
And I was completely and utterly in belief of them. And now I literally say to people, if you want to get healthy, watch the mainstream, read the food guidelines, then do the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is that simple.
Yeah.
And so that's my journey. So I'm still doing the personal training, still doing the rehab. I don't do the middle distance running anymore. I don't play tennis anymore. I've gone
Mhm.
back to five-a-side soccer. A couple of other little bits that you might have heard before. When I was 23, I was shown a very convincing image that of my hip, that because I had that lower left quadrant pain, they thought it was coming from the hip, and they said I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 50.
Mm.
You know, so that's the other thing that I deal with when people say, "Oh, this doctor has told me this. It's categoric. There's nothing you can do about it." I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
Okay."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
You
so
know,
many. Yeah.
yes, and that's it. I mean, when we get into some of the questions that you wanted to talk about, I've got
Mhm.
some actual examples of those sort of things,
Yeah.
and so I do what I do, and I think this is why we're birds of a feather. Before we recorded, you said that
Mhm.
something just resonated with me totally. When you get a result from a person and you get a message and it says life changing, you've changed my life. You know, I've actually got one. I'm doing a presentation at the end of March. I'm not going to reveal it here, but literally stopped them going under the knife and having to have an organ transplant.
Mm.
Yeah, it doesn't matter about how many people are watching this, because if you have 10 people watching this and five go away and do something and improve their life, wow, that's really powerful. That's
Mhm.
really, really powerful. So I love what I do. Really enjoy it. I enjoy trying to get that knowledge out there and fighting the tide of big pharma and the pharmaceuticals, huge amounts of money and ridiculous advertising spend, by talking about real people and having real
Yeah.
conversations about real things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, your story in many ways mimics mine. I think you started way more active than I did. I was never, really a sports person growing up or anything like that, but I did have a period where once I decided to make a change in my life, I realized where I was and I wanted to get healthy. I started with fitness, so I got super in shape. I opened up a CrossFit gym. I was a CrossFit coach. I did all these things, and then about 5 years into that, same as you, I still had issues. I had urgent bowels, I had bad skin, I had depression, I had, 18 different injuries and chronic pain issues. I couldn't work out a day without getting hurt. I went from 6 days a week of exercise to if I could get 2 or 3 days a week, that was a good week for me because I just hurt so much all the time. Um, and the fitness piece of it was great, but it wasn't answering all of the problems. It was, I looked good for a while until I didn't. Then, I started putting on weight again. I had lost 70 pounds and I put 40 pounds back on. It's like, what is going on? And then the combination of the nutrition with the fitness is really kind of what brought it all together. So that
Yeah, I
sounds
love
kind
what
of
you
like similar. Like you were already active and you could do stuff, but it wasn't until you got the nutrition right that it all kind of came together.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I found really interesting when I was working with Coach Raymond at the Steak and Butter Gang, because we both had coronary artery calcium scans that were atrocious,
Hmm.
and he said something. I think he's one of the best people around. He's very profound. And one day just summed it up and said, "What's really strange is talking about himself, I was over here having this terrible diet and knowing it was terrible, and you were doing all the healthy stuff. But we've gone into the future and we've arrived at the same point. So it was the food, it was the carbohydrates, it was that was similar, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because I was doing what I allegedly thought was great. I mean, in the end, all of the stuff I just said I was eating were carbohydrates, which, however way you stack it, whether it comes in a potato or whether it comes in cereal or whether it comes in an apple or whatever, it's still a bunch of glucose. It's just put together differently. But as soon as it's in your mouth, it will just
Mhm.
break down to glucose and
Mhm.
and put your insulin up and cause you
Sure.
all sorts of
Sure.
problems.
And that's the impact of what we eat. How would you describe what it is, right? Because it's not carbohydrates that are the problem as much as it is what are they doing.
Yeah. The inappropriate level for a start,
Mhm.
the frequency.
Mhm.
Um, s- so you take an apple, which has been hybridized to be this super sugary thing, and you eat an apple. Okay, and I'm deliberately using an apple because an apple
Sure.
a day keeps the doctor away. The best thing you can do with them now is throw it at the doctor, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's sweeter than it was, and there's less fibre, and that's deliberate. That's man-made. I'm not having out nature, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and your body will detect that toxic level of sugar and do the appropriate thing, which is release insulin. But that's not appropriate to continually do that. So that is the issue. It's not carbohydrates per se. It is the quantity, the frequency, and what
Mhm.
we've done to them.
Yeah.
But I live a zero carb life because for me, there's no need for them. They're not essential. You don't need them. I prefer to have my liver make the glucose that I need.
Mhm.
That's my take on it. If
Yeah.
people want them and they thrive, they could be like I was. This is why I was sort of I'm a little bit reticent to sort of say this, is because I did do that and I did think I was thriving and I did think I was okay. But 30 years of it and being really mindful didn't work out well for me. But also I have loads and loads of people, especially because of my diabetic side,
Sure.
working with lots and lots of people that come in, and it was actually more coming from them than from me, where they were saying, "I'll drop my carbs, and you know what, this is just the best thing I ever did for my
Right.
diabetes." Not type 1, by the way, but type 2. So,
Or either
um,
one, type 1 or type 2, right? It can
sorry.
work for both. I said either one, type 1
Oh
or
yeah,
type 2. I mean, it
yeah,
helps
yeah,
either
and
way.
do it different ways, obviously, because type 1
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
produce enough insulin. So,
So, looking at because I like talking about concepts and principles
yep,
behind these things and why they're working. When I
do it.
look at one of the things I think in the carnivore space, particularly, we tend to harp on, carbs aren't essential. We don't need them, or stay away from this. Meat has everything you need, and we talk about the individual things, the components of what it means to be carnivore. What I
Hmm.
think that can be off-putting to a lot of people, not having the connection and thinking like, well, I don't want to be carnivore, but I understand they're saying these things are working. If we can talk about why these things work, like what is it about meat that makes it so beneficial? When we've talked we've talked before about nutrient density and bioavailability and all those types of things. What is your like when you're talking with clients? How do you talk to them about making the changes and why the changes are important instead of just saying carbs are bad, right? Because that
Oh yeah,
message
no,
can be that message can be off-putting to people when they hear us talk about these things. They hear, well, but how is a potato bad? Right? Just on
mm.
the surface of looking at that and trying to wrap their head around different things. How do you explain what the benefit of reducing carbs, increasing red meat, those how do you explain that to people?
Well, I go a little bit broader than that. So, if you
Yeah.
look at sort of their age and their past eating history, so they could have eating disorders or yo-yo dieting. Look at their activity levels, their mood and stress and symptoms and families and concerns and what they want. The
Mhm.
why that makes you cry. Why have they come to me? Once you start to understand the individual, then you can sort of tailor something that's going to be suitable. So, if you don't think that person is amenable or open to talking in that way, and you just want to say, okay, let's just take one step. Let's do one thing. Take one thing out of your diet that is not helping you. So
Mhm.
you can do like a food and mood diary. You can say, right,
Mm.
you eat something. What I tend to do is either get people to WhatsApp me or just write it down. Right, I had porridge oats this morning. How did you feel? 2 hours later. How did you feel an hour later? Did you feel
Mhm.
energized? Did you need to eat again at 11 and stuff like that? And you can be quite forensic, and you can get the people to think about what they're eating and the effect it's having. So let's say they said, "Oh, I had my porridge this morning. I loved it. It's great." Okay, I would leave that alone. Initially, I would just let that go because that's
Sure.
fine. All right, we're going to do that. And you will find things. So they might say, "Oh, well, I had a sandwich lunchtime or 11 o'clock because I was hungry after breakfast only 2 hours later." That's very common.
Yeah.
Right. How do you feel after the sandwich? I actually feel a bit tired. Felt really, what sort of bread was it? Oh, although that doesn't matter. As we know, it doesn't matter too much, but it does at the beginning. Oh, I had very doughy white bread and you know, I just had some tomatoes in there or something, and within a week you'll see this pattern. I've got this at the moment. I've got somebody who's a week into it, and a few things happen. Firstly, I don't say don't have carbs, eat more protein, eat more fat. I actually look at
Mhm.
what they're eating and comment on what they're eating. So the first thing this person is, I'll use this as an example because it's pretty general.
Yeah.
Right. You're not eating enough because you want to lose weight. Okay. I say, when you calorie restrict or whatever, however you want to put it, you're restricting micronutrients. Did you know that? Did you know you're now saying to yourself, I'm going to restrict my food. I'm going to restrict my potassium. I'm going to restrict my magnesium. I'm going to restrict. So if that floats their boat, oh, I've never thought of it like that. That's the thing I like to do. Get people to just think slightly differently.
Mhm.
It's not about 2,000 calories because you could have 2,000 calories of ice cream. But if you're under eating, you've got a problem straight away. Before you've even started on what type of food you're eating, you're under eating, and
Mhm.
that's really common. And the weird thing is, and this really is strange in my obesity clinic, you can be fat and malnourished. You could
Oh my
be
gosh. Yes.
100 pounds overweight and malnourished. And that just never really resonates with people at first. And they laugh and go, look at me. You're saying I don't eat enough. I say, no, I'm saying you don't eat enough of the right things
Right.
and you're eating tons of the wrong things that are not doing anything in your body other than being stored as fat.
Yeah.
So you get into that concept and just it's actually easier to just make it really sort of layman's and down to earth. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I mean, I just had a litre of orange juice. And I'm like, right, okay. So how much protein's in that? Well, none. I don't think there is any. They'll answer for you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
How much fat's in it? Oh, none. I'm doing good, aren't I? There's no fat in that. All right. Okay. What do you think your body's made out of? Is it made out of orange juice? Is it made out of carbohydrates, or do you think you need protein and fats? Oh, and they'll just the penny will drop at some point that they
Right.
need to eat what the body needs, not what they're being told is good.
Right.
And that
The difference between providing nutrition and
yeah.
providing energy. I think that's a
I
that
think the doorbell was going strange. Is that okay?
go for it. No, it's fine. Go for it. Go get it.
All right, stop now. That's okay.
Okay.
It's the food
Providing
police.
Hey, the
Go.
food police, they found you already. Yeah, the difference between providing nutrition and providing energy and helping people understand that they're not the same thing. That energy is a byproduct of good nutrition, but it is not nutrition of itself.
Mm, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to get into people is to think, what is the purpose of what you're eating?
Mhm.
And what is the result afterwards? So like I say, with the mood, the food and mood diary, that's pretty interesting because people start to see that there is definitely a trend and there's certain things that they're not good with. And they'll
Yeah.
say stuff. I'll say, well, maybe those tomatoes aren't doing you any favors. Do you know what? Every time I eat tomatoes, I get a funny taste in my mouth, which I don't really like. I'm like, well, maybe that was your body telling you that that's not
Yeah.
good for you. And that
That's
does
not
happen. Or
that's not good.
you
Yeah.
every time I had a cappuccino, my tummy felt a bit upset, but I just thought that was a normal thing. They'll also say a lot of the things are normalized, and they just think it's either aging or,
Oh, for sure.
you know. So
That's a big trap. That's a big trap is thinking that this is normal. I used to think that. when I had to
Mm.
go to the bathroom 8 times a day and I couldn't do anything without going to the bathroom or checking it, making sure I knew where the bathroom was, I didn't know anything was wrong. I just thought that's how life was supposed to be. I didn't know any
Well,
better.
yeah, without being too dramatic, I mean, that's exactly what I
Yeah.
thought when I had my colonoscopy. I thought, "Well, this is it. This is my cards that I've been dealt. I can't do
Mhm.
anything about this. Happened to me mum. It's happened in my family.
Yep.
This is it. My card is marked," and now I realise that's totally not true. But,
Yeah.
yeah, normalising things that aren't normal, lots of gas, lots of bloating, going to the toilet, like you say, a lot, or even well, a lot of people don't think it's a lot. They'll say, "Oh, I only go 3 times a day." I'm like, "3 times a day? Wow, that is a lot." And then, I try to be very simplistic and say, that is saying there's a lot of waste in what you're eating.
Mhm.
You'll spend a lot of money on food and it's literally being flushed down the toilet because your body is rejecting it.
Yeah.
If you saw a car going along the road and it was spluttering out, black, you know, gas out the back of that car, you'd think, well, what's he putting in the car?
Mhm.
Why is that car doing that? So your
Yeah.
exhaust is telling you that there's something not right in what's up the other end, what you're putting into it. So
Yeah.
I think trying to get people to realise that the problematic foods tend to be carbohydrate based. That's the thing. So it might not even be the carbs. In bread it could be the gluten. So that would be a
Mhm.
problem, and it can
Mhm.
and can be too much fiber for people. That can be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and we if we're that's assuming that we're talking about whole foods, right? That it tend to be
Yeah,
carbs,
yeah,
right? Oxalates, anti-nutrients, those type of things. Those 'cause plant-based foods. When we talk about processed foods, who knows? There's so many other things that go into that conversation, right? Because the more processed things, and a lot of people don't understand this. This is something conceptually too that people need to understand is processed food is always less nutritious,
mm,
regardless of whether the label says fortified with, includes whatever, like none of that stuff matters. I saw I forget who it was, Craig McCloskey potentially, I think it was on Instagram. That might have been him. He did a video where he bought a box of cornflakes, took a put the cornflakes in a blender,
yep,
put them in a
yep,
bowl in water, and then took a magnet through all the water, and all the iron came out of the frosted flakes, and he brushed all the iron filings onto a napkin. It's like
mm,
they're literally putting iron flakes, dust, in our food, saying it's fortified with iron,
yep,
even though iron in that form is toxic. Our body can't use it, and it does absolutely nothing for it. But because they're putting metal in our food, they can say that it has iron
mm,
even though our
yes,
body can do nothing with it and it's actually harming us, not helping us. But
yeah,
that's
it's
the kind of thing
frightening.
that people don't understand. If it's
Yeah.
processed, it's not nutrition, period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing about being bioavailable as well. It can say it's got X amount of protein or X
Mhm.
amount of vitamin E, but if your body can't use it,
Yep.
it it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And that's a lot of the problems with, well, there's countless problems with processed food. But if it's in a box and you look at the ingredients, I mean, I would always say to people, right, look at the ingredients and think, right, how many of those would have been in the kitchen 50 years ago? How many could be in your kitchen now, and you could pick them out and make this food that you're getting in the,
Mhm.
in the box?
Right.
And even if there's only 8 ingredients, which is quite low for some of the food in the box,
Yeah.
most people would say, well, there's maybe two things there.
Even bread, right? If you go
Mm.
to the old school recipes, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Bill Schindler and the Modern
Yep.
Stone Age Kitchen and what he's doing.
Yep.
He makes sourdough bread that people who would normally be impacted with major insulin responses, gut issues, gluten responses, all those types of things. He's doing fermented sourdough bread that
Mm.
is based off of recipes that are 200 years old, right
Yep.
before we had all the industrial revolution and everything. And it's a game changer for people because
Yep.
there's so much. It's so much closer to what we would find, and it's prepared in a way where it's more bioavailable, and it's got actually some nutrition in it. So it's a whole different process, and that's one of the things I love about what he does, taking old methods and getting rid of the modern processing, and doing things the old school way.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. Patience is one of the big key elements to everything I do.
Ooh. Mhm.
So um, bread would have taken at least a week with fermentation.
Right.
like you say, 200 years ago. So the bread we've got now, which is literally like 2 hours from start to finish, that's just too refined, it's too quick. Going back to sort of the analogy with the carbohydrates, it's just too refined for the body,
Yeah.
and therefore, when it gets into the body, the responses from the organs and from the hormonal sort of signal system just can't cope because
Mhm.
it's alien food. It is absolutely not what we're designed to eat at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And I like that experiment. And this is the other thing. I always get people to try and experiment if they absolutely think I'm talking out of my rear end. I say, look, don't listen to me then. Doesn't matter. I've got 1,000 reviews and like 200 success stories. You test yourself. Go to a chemist, all right, and buy, or you call it a pharmacy, and get a blood glucose monitor, which will cost you about £20. And eat
Mhm.
your favourite foods and watch your blood glucose. And you tell me in a week's time what foods made your blood glucose go up a bit too much for your liking and what didn't. And
Right.
then if you're okay with your Snickers bar and your porridge and your bread, and you think it's a good reaction compared to a scrambled egg with bacon,
Yep.
I will shut my trap because
Right.
I think there's nothing better than those sort of things that you can experiment with. So you could get somebody to get some cornflakes, grind it up, get a magnet, and prove it to themselves, even though they've seen it on the internet. And that is very powerful. And
Mhm.
I think once you say, "Look, I'm so confident in what I'm saying," you can test this yourself. Go and test it yourself. Most people actually find that quite convincing anyway, but I've had a few
Yeah.
people. I even had one guy that couldn't believe it, bought 2 different glucose monitors, a continual glucose monitor, and sent me the data and got absolutely the complete reverse of how he started. He got angry about how he'd been lied to, how he could have managed his type 2 diabetes much sooner. How
Yep.
are they getting away with it, Stephen? They're lying to me. All these people, they could have told me this. They obviously know it. And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, just remember how reluctant you were.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that won't push it because it's going to be hard for them. If
Mhm.
you're a nurse working in diabetic practice and you have 20 people and 5 of them are like you were when I first met you, you're going to stop saying it. You're going to just roll over and say, right, they want their
Yeah.
porridge, they want their
Well,
Snickers
but
bar.
also they get in trouble, right? I mean, look
And they,
at Professor Noakes and, and the struggles he had to go through,
mm, yep,
being literally taken to court because he made a recommendation that saves people's lives, and he had to
mm,
prove over, was it like a 10-year thing of
yes,
just going through and trying to say, "Look, guys, here's the science. I'm not hurting people by telling them to cut back on carbs. Like
mm,
it's not a thing." So,
yep.
yeah. What is your evaluation process when you look at someone getting started as a coach, to say, here's the things you need to change and here's where I think you should start? Some of it's simply just building some habits. We get people that come from different places. Maybe it's a habit they need to change. Maybe it's a choice that they're making. Maybe they're not doing enough physical activity. Maybe they need to increase their protein. Like, the list of things that people could change in their lives to improve is huge. How do you work with someone to determine what's the thing for them to get started with?
When I talk to them.
Hmm.
And it comes out. I mean, yes, I send an online health and activity form.
Yeah.
That's it. That goes out, so people want to talk to me. Go on a website and they can book. Well, before I've even spoken to them, I've collected the data. Height, age, activity levels. What do they
Hmm.
eat? What have they tried?
Hmm.
Do they fast? What's their mood like? And all that. So yeah, you get a good picture. But I tell you what, every single picture you get from a piece of paper with all those answers is not as valuable as getting onto a Zoom and talking to them. Because as
Yeah.
soon as you start talking to them, firstly, they've answered some things because they think they should answer this way. And secondly, they don't really think about their why. They sort of know that something's up, but that's
Mhm.
the whole point of having a coach. They want a little bit of guidance. So normally, some sort of misconceptions are talked about. For instance, I'm not going to be shouting down your ear or emailing you at 5 a.m. in the morning, get your ass down the gym and all this sort of stuff. Unless you
Wait,
want
you don't
that.
do that? Hold on, I do that. No, I'm kidding. I don't do that.
I've had a couple of people lately say, "Yeah, guilt me out, please do that." But
Mhm.
And I think because of my sort of qualifications, I do get a lot of people that send me bloods, and that they have particular things that they
Mhm.
want to deal with. Um, so I'm not really sort of like the coach that just has somebody come in and they want to lose 10 pounds and sort of look a bit
Yeah.
fit. I don't tend to get
Yeah.
that. I don't think you do actually. I think I had people that. I think the most common thing I have is I've tried everything else, or the medical establishment have given up on me,
Yep.
or I've got these bloods and it doesn't make any sense to me. So on
Mhm.
the diabetic side, I'll have someone with a continual glucose monitor, and it's fabulous. And they'll have a 6 monthly fasted insulin C peptide test, and it's fabulous. But their HbA1c is higher than it was. So they think carnivore or low carb's not working. So then I have to explain why the HbA1c is broken, and it's not a great metric once you start doing low carb, keto, or
Yep.
carnivore. Which is, I'm actually writing a book about this, not this one thing, but about bloods in the context of this way of eating, and doing a talk about it. And I actually had a brilliant example of how sort of specialist it can be. So I had a guy come to me and he had lots of oxidized LDL. He's allowed me to talk about this, but he wants to be sort of private about it. A lot of people with their health like the results, but don't want to go public. So
Yeah.
he had a blood test, and they do this thing called a plaque test, PLAC, which looks at PLA2, which is an enzyme which is normally, right, so normally they
Mhm.
associate with cardiovascular disease. And I said, well, actually, the reason people are jumping all over this is because they don't also understand that enzyme degrades oxidized LDL. That's one of its roles. You've got high levels of oxidized LDL, you're really worried about it. I'm not, because you've got that high level, your body is alert.
Mhm.
I bet my bottom dollar on
And
that.
it's
And
responding, right?
yeah, it's doing what it should do. But you have 30 years as a vegan. Sorry, but you have wrecked your system a little bit,
Mhm.
which you were fine with. So then we get into the weeds a little bit about vitamin E as well, because there's a brilliant guy called Barry Tan. If you don't know Barry Tan, I would definitely have a look at his work. And he looks at the different types of vitamin E, because vitamin E isn't vitamin E. There's like tocotrienols is one thing, and there's other types. And he discovered this one that fits perfectly into the lipid membrane. So with this client, we decided that's what we were going to do. Or he decided, because he's very, very upfront with things. I'm going to do that. That sounds good. And then we get the bloods. Lo and behold, oxidized LDL is plummeted. Well,
Hmm.
you'd never get that in the mainstream. You just
Right.
would not get that. Or you might get it by a sort of serendipitous luck. But
Mhm.
but I don't want to put people off, because I'm not, you know, yeah, I do like science, but I don't push as like I'm going to be the sort of biohack king. But I can do that sort of stuff. But I can also have someone that says, I've got 70 pounds to lose. I don't
Sure.
feel great. I'd like to look good, on the beach. Or what was it the other day? I had somebody, I just want to be
Well,
around for my kids. I want to live
yeah.
longer. So I can do
See,
that as well.
yeah, I like the reference to the biohacking and those types of things because I think there's a place for that stuff. And I think figuring out being able to look at somebody's blood work and say, "Hey, there's something I'm noticing that's X, Y, or Z." Um, what I want people to understand, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit, is that those things are great, but the impact they have is greater if you have a foundation laid first. Right? If you're still eating standard American diet and then you go and you get this thing and you say, "I need this special vitamin A to get my to get my this enzyme down." Okay, great, but you're doing all this other stuff. What's the point?
Mm.
Right? So there's
Yeah.
a process right before you get to those
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
destinations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Vitamin E, by the way. So, yeah, and that's it. I mean, this guy is a long-standing client and came to
Mhm.
me and realized that I knew more than previous coaches he'd had, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it was like, "I've got loads of blood. Do you wanna see them?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Love to see them."
Yeah.
But like I say, the lady I mentioned earlier, who is obsessed with calorie counting, I just was down to earth and said, "Look, if you restrict food, you restrict salt." If you use that as an example, you're
Mhm.
restricting magnesium. And she'd never looked at it like that, because
Right.
that's not how calorie counting is presented. Calorie counting is, which is pointless. I personally think that that is a pointless pursuit, and that's been proven time and time again. Is deliberately restricting your body of nutrients and
Mhm.
under eating so you're hungry,
Mhm.
which is just to me, obviously, going back to my I'm not in the medical profession, but this seems really obvious. If you're
Yeah,
going to addict yourself from eating, you're going to be thinking about food all the time.
all the
That's
time.
it,
Right.
all the time.
I'm tired of thinking about food all the time, but I'm also not eating, so I'm thinking about food all the time. What? That
Yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The conceptual thing. I try to make everything common sense,
Mhm.
and and say to people, "Do I put it in their court. So, do you think what you're doing is helping?"
Yeah.
Or that sort
Yeah.
of thing, and
Yeah.
why isn't it helping you? What is your routine, and what would you change about it? Because people come to you and they've got these thoughts already. So if one, I don't want to get too personal about everybody, but I can think of people wanting to give up certain things. I said, "Well, what have you done about it?" "Well, nothing. I just keep thinking about it." So, right, well, you've got
Mhm.
to do an action. You've got to do something. So let's say, to save the person guessing if they're watching, uh, they want to give up coffee. All right,
Yep.
I find it really hard. Okay, well, why not get up and not have coffee for at least half an hour? Is that a bit more manageable? Oh yeah, okay, I could try that. And then maybe that's worked for a week. Okay, well now let's do
Mhm.
45 minutes. Let's do an hour. How do you feel not having a coffee in the morning? Well, actually, don't miss it. Or but I also live in the real world. I'm really missing it. And what I'm doing now is I'm eating loads of junk food. Right, okay. We're gonna have another look at this, at maybe the amount of coffee you're drinking over the time. Can you have half a cup? So if you have
Yep.
half a cup every time you normally have a cup, or normally, oh, I have a big mug. All right, okay, we'll have a small cup. But don't change the amount of cups or mugs. Oh, great. At the end of the week, you've halved it. So
Yeah.
there's so many
Yeah.
different ways to sort of approach it, really.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, you're talking about the idea of making change attainable. It doesn't have to be too big. We talk
Mm,
about this when we talked before. It's that one step over the comfort zone line. It doesn't have to be a leap over. Like a lot of people see, oh, you got to get outside your comfort zone. So they think you have to take this running start and jump as far across the outside the comfort zone as possible. When really you just take one step over and you're out. You've done
yeah.
something different. You've made a
I think
change. Like you've moved in that direction.
Yeah, the big thing on TikTok at the moment is this saving a penny thing, where you can get a template, and basically the first day you save a penny, you put a penny into like a piggy bank, and the next day you
Hmm.
put two pennies in, the next day you put three in, the next day you put four in, and because it seems really simple and not much money, people are on TikTok saying, "Well, I did this, and wow, I've managed to save £6,000 or something because I really got into it. And I started doing five pennies, and then 10 and
Hmm.
15." And it is that gradual change, and it does work the other way as well. When people are talking about their health, they'll say, "I thought I was pretty healthy, and then I found myself pre-diabetic and fat with low quadrant pain, with a big thing and lots of athlete." That's me, because
Hmm.
over the time it just everything built up.
Yeah.
So why not, if that's how things attacked you and ruined your health, why not undo it in a gradual
Hmm.
way? And that's why I was talking about patience, because people have big problem with patience, and
Oh
they'll
gosh. Yes.
they'll say, "I've been doing this 2 weeks. What's gone wrong? Why have I not got the magic wand?" And I'm like, "Okay, so it took you 2 weeks to be really unhealthy, did it?" And of course, it never did. It's always like, "Oh,
Right.
well, I've been like this 15 years. I've been yo-yo dieting in and out since I was 20, and I'm 50
Hmm.
now." And you're like, "Right, okay, so a 30-year problem, you're expecting 2 weeks." So, I think that's a big thing I talk about. Just be patient, appreciate. The Americans tend to talk a lot about vitamin G, gratitude, and I
Hmm.
think that is a big thing. Don't worry about the scale so much. Just think about, well, my skin's a bit better. I feel I've got a bit more energy. Don't feel so
Right.
bloated. I'm not going to the toilet 8 times. I'm only going 4 times. And all those things. Then the scale doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
if all those things improved, the scale will follow along at some point, because you're eating the right things, you're getting in these good habits. Most people spontaneously want to exercise once they start eating the right way and have more
Hmm.
energy. Their insulin's lower because it's a big factor in that as well. So
Yep.
um, I think it's just still treating people as individuals. I'm being very broad here, because for some people they like the science, so I will use the science, and some people just want, I want to be told what to do. I want a checklist. All right, I can give you a
Yeah.
checklist. You know, and some people just want to know the abstract, the idea.
Hmm.
Never
Sure.
thought about I've never thought about eating more to lose weight. And I'm like, yeah, eat more of the right things and less of the wrong things. And that's,
Yeah,
a lot of YouTube comments say, "Oh, have you ever thought it's not carnivore, it's not the meat, it's dumping all the processed foods." And I'm like, I always think of that
sure,
because
sure.
that definitely is part of it.
Right,
Maybe it
right.
isn't just the meat. Maybe it is because they're not having seed oils. But
Maybe it's
I
both.
yeah, and that's when you get into healthy user bias as well, isn't it? Because if you're
Right.
carnivore, you're thinking about other things. And, I'm not anti-vegan. If someone's a vegan, they're thinking about it. And I don't think many vegans would be happy when they start getting into what seed oils are like. I'm hoping,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
always have a conversation with anyone that's sort of bad on YouTube to me. I never get into arguments. So I say, look, if you're a vegan and you're serious about XYZ, have a look at this research. Have a think about this
Mhm.
because you're picking on the wrong person. You need to start looking at the food producers, the pesticides they're using, the monoculture sort of way that they're growing your food. It's
Right.
terrible. The amount of animals that you are killing, not you deliberately, because you don't like me saying that, but the
But, yes,
food producers
supporting the
are.
industry, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel that anyone that's thinking about their health, I take my hat off to because they're doing something. And
Sure.
I think that's the other thing. So when people first sign up, I say, look, the first thing I've got to say is well done. You're actually doing something. You are now, this is a thing.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping it'll stick with me and it'll work and it'll be a new habit for you. It's not going to be a regime or a protocol or anything like that. It's just going to be your life. It's going to be
Yeah.
a big change. It's going to come as a nice, easy habit because you're going to enjoy the food. You're going to enjoy the benefits of eating this way. How you feel, how you look, how your clothes fit, the energy, your sleep, your
Mhm.
anxiety
Mhm.
levels, all of that. Um, and that tends to happen. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it, really.
And when we talk about all of these changes, I know we've talked a lot about nutrition, but there's some physical things, right? There's a need for including fitness activities and improving your body's physical
Hmm.
ability. When we look at the big picture of all of these things, if I said, you know, if I asked you, how would the term body confidence apply to you or the people that you work with? What does that mean, first of all, to you? And then how have you seen clients you've worked with display that in their lives? What does it mean to be
So,
body confident?
body confident. Well, I don't know if people truly become body confident because if it's deep rooted, I don't think most people don't like looking at themselves. So if
Okay.
I fast if I rewind to when I spoke about me being up on the bodybuilding stage, I
Mhm.
felt I need to not sound arrogant, but so even when you don't do a bodybuilding show unless you want to show your body, but it doesn't mean you're confident about your body. That sounds
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
weird, you know.
Yeah.
So I I would say that's such more that it's a mental health thing. So when you talk about the mind body connection, how
Mhm.
you see yourself, it just taps into maybe how your parents talk to you, whether you were bullied at school, what happened when you were a teenager, your
Mhm.
peer group. There's so many factors to unpick. A bit like someone with anorexia who everyone can see does not look well and needs to eat more.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't see it, and I've dealt with a few people that have had anorexia in the past, and I always ask them, I say, when you look at pictures of you when that was, at its worst, can you now see why people were worried about you? They're like, "Oh, absolutely."
Mhm.
Could
Mhm.
you at the time? Absolutely not. No,
Absolutely
I
not.
couldn't.
Yeah.
So
What if is there an aspect of the body, we look at the human being, there's more to us than how we look, right? There's
mm,
physical things, there's health things, there's mental things. Can body confidence be applied to more than just appearance?
oh, yeah, because you're talking about, the daily activities, your tasks that you've gotta do.
Mhm.
So, I know we're both coaches and into fitness, but I'll have people that can't even get out of their chair or they have a Zimmer frame. So the confidence to get out of a chair without falling over. I know you're talking more about an abstract, but I still think
No,
the
that's
physicality
that's
of
great.
physical things is
Yes.
important. So if you can't get out of a chair because you're worried about falling over, the chances of you getting out of a chair are diminished. So you have to get somebody to be really confident that they can get out of a chair. And I always use this analogy because when when people talk about exercise or influencers talk about exercise, more often than not, and we're probably both culprits of this, you're in the gym and you're doing pull-ups or you're doing something intense or, a kettlebell that's the size of your head's being swung around. Well, someone sitting in a chair is not going to be inspired by that. So you have to say, look, for you, that is an intense exercise. Getting out of the
Mhm.
chair, you've got to do that. And you've got to do that with someone around so you feel safe till you feel safe and you feel more solid in your legs, you feel more solid in your hips. Um, I know you're recording this, so I haven't got a picture close at hand, but I literally had a woman bent over on a Zimmer frame who used the words, "The NHS have given up on me." So she
Mm.
literally bent over, looking at the ground. Now, at the end of the session, not the one session, but like, a group of sessions, she could stand upright, she could walk without a Zimmer frame. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that that woman is 100% confident and would go and walk down the shops without her husband or whatever, but she's certainly more confident in her house and going to the garden and
Sure.
confident in her clothes, her digestion improved. And I think when you start having physical benefits, you then get those other benefits. So I snuck in there that her digestion improved. Well, that's sort of obvious if you're not bent over, but she didn't think that would happen. She wasn't
Mhm.
expecting that. She just thought I was going to get her out of a Zimmer frame, which we did. But then she said, "Oh, my tummy's never gurgling and all that anymore." I'm like, "Yeah, because you're standing upright and you're
Mhm.
walking, and you're going into the garden." So it then has that mental impact. It's a question. It's a bit. We probably need over a month to really talk about it because there's so many different things that could come in. But
Right.
just being confident. Well, using your example, confident you can leave the house and not need the loo, not need to go to the toilet.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah, huge difference, a
Right.
very big difference in your life. So being confident that you can do, firstly, the most mundane things, getting out of a chair, getting out of bed. If you fall over, you can get yourself up. You can make yourself a cup of tea. You can, the my rehab does tend to have older people in this situation where they're trapped in their house,
Mhm.
literally trapped in their house. So
Mhm.
you can get them into the garden, you can get them to the end of the street. Then they see themselves differently. And another one said to me, "My world just closed in. Did you use this? Use the
Oh,
hand gesture." You
yes.
know? And I'm
Yes.
like, "Right, well," and I just said, "Right, well, we're gonna make your world do this."
Ah, I love it.
And that's it.
That's it right there. That is it all the way. 100%.
Yeah, it is. Sums it up. That's what you're trying to do is get people back to where they used to be, playing
Right.
in the sun, seeing their friends,
Yep.
getting up, going to bed when they want, not worried they're gonna fall over, and you have got to have the right nutrition to help those things, and that's quite a hard sell because the
Mhm.
people that those clients are seeing are being told to eat the food pyramid.
Right.
So you have and I'm going in and saying, "Right, well, you need strong bones, okay? So forget the calcium tablets, let's get some protein into you." "Oh, I can't have
Mhm.
protein, that's bad for me."
Mhm.
Literally. Like, well, it's not having protein that's got you into this state. So you're gonna keep eating how you're eating that got you into this state. Does
Right.
that make sense to you? And I always try and throw it back. Does that make sense to you? Right. No, well, it doesn't actually. It's like, okay, so let's look at trying to get some decent protein into you and let's see where that takes you.
Right.
And then, people feel better. I've yet to have anyone say, "I've started eating protein. It's terrible. I feel awful." That's literally never happened. Never happened. So I've over a decade of doing this and I've never heard that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. Never heard of that as a problem at all. Usually it ends up being, I how can I get more?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure.
That's a very interesting thing you just said there because that is what happens.
Yeah.
Right, I'm worried I can't eat enough. You've heard that, I've heard that.
Yep.
I
Yep.
can't do one
Yep.
meal a day because I can't get enough in. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this is the person that wanted calorie restrict when I first met you."
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Cool. And now I appreciate you being on, Stephen. Do you have any last things before we go? And then I'll ask you like where people can find you and stuff. What's one takeaway you want to leave with everybody?
Um, Believe your own eyes and ears and experience, and do things for yourself. I
Woo.
think don't listen to the telly. If someone's selling you something or telling you something's good, see if they've got something to sell. So if they're saying X, Y, Z thing is the best thing since sliced bread, just check in the description whether they're selling it, or
Yeah.
just get your research right. It doesn't mean it is bad, because I've got one thing that I take I think is brilliant. So yeah, I want to tell everyone about it. But just
Mhm.
be careful of someone that maybe tells you one week one thing's good, and then the next week something else is good, and they've got a long list of things that they're trying to push.
Yeah.
Um,
I, I I like to tell people to stay away from people that claim anything is the best or the greatest way to do anything.
yes,
If it's the best, then everyone would be doing it. You wouldn't need to be selling me on it,
you wouldn't need to. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, because a lot of people don't believe I'm 60, right? And they say, "What do you
Mhm,
put it down to?" So I actually say, well, full transparency, I think it's carnivore, but I do take one supplement. So it could
mhm.
be that. It could be that, but that's it. So, but I never really push it. I just wait for someone to ask, and then I say,
Gotcha. Awesome. Appreciate it. Now, where can people find you? I know you're on Instagram and
yeah,
YouTube. Is it all the
yeah.
UK Carnivore?
No, the YouTube is under Stephen Thomas Bachelor of Science with Honours or something like that, which I should have changed, but it's too late now. Yes, UK Carnivore, you'll find Stephen Thomas, you'll find me on YouTube. But yeah, it's the UK Carnivore. And by the
Okay.
way, I don't mind if you mix me up with the other UK carnivores you mentioned at the top of the show, because they're all great. They are all
Yeah.
good.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on, Stephen, and I'll let you know when this comes out. We can get the word out.
Great.